Views and opinions expressed by the host, guests, and callers do not necessarily represent the views of the Black Talk Media Project, Black Talk Radio Network, sponsors, advertisers, or partners.
Hi, this is Russell Campbell, veteran of the Civil Rights Movement, and you're listening to Black Talk Radio, a radio station that reaches out to all the people of the United States that deals with black issues.
Welcome to Black Talk Radio News with Scotty Reed, and my guest is Pam of the Trojan Horse Press, and we are going to speak to her about one of their recent publications, The Beauty Con Game. First, let me welcome you to the program, Pam. This is your first time on the program, and I'm just really glad to have you on as a guest.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Scotty. I was looking forward to being on your program. I have a lot of admiration for, I go to your website. I know you've commented a lot on cows, and your opinions are always insightful, so I was really excited to be invited as a guest here.
Well, thank you for that. Now, I want to jump right to this book, The Beauty Con Game. And the book, I had to get the book because I have 3 daughters. And, my oldest daughter is in her 20s. I have another daughter right behind her, and then one who is 14, will be 15 here shortly. And, I've just noticed them struggling, coming up with their looks, being preoccupied with how they look. And, although as a father, I think my daughters are very beautiful, and I could not understand why they were lacking in self-confidence. As a woman, do you have any insight into that?
Oh, absolutely. As a black woman who was once a black girl, there's a tremendous amount of pressure to adhere to the white beauty standard. Despite all of the talk, and, when it comes from your parents or it comes from a family member, you expect them to say that. You don't necessarily, it's nice to hear, but that often isn't reflected outside the home. And now you're subject to the opinions and pressures of your peers, and also of the television, which for the most part, black children watch a disproportionate amount of television than any other group in America, from what I understand. So they're getting a steady dose of white supremacy beauty standards, white supremacy value system, and also that white women are the standard for everything. White girls are the standard for everything. And I think the thing that makes it even more critical for black girls of this generation is when I was coming up, there wasn't a lot of interracial stuff. There wasn't any. And also, you did not have this image of black males paying homage to white females. But now black girls growing up maybe in the last 15 years have seen this constant relentless imagery of black males who, by the way, we're not blaming black males, but black males paying homage to the beauty of white females. Even in commercials, you'll see a black guy standing with a group of white guys, and they're oogling some white chick that's walking by. Mm-hmm. But you never see the reverse. You never see black men and white men oogling a black lady or black woman or black girl who's passing by. So the messages that they're getting to me are much more devastating than the ones that devastated me.
Now, just for the listeners' benefit, this is just the first in a series of interviews that I will be doing with Pam about this book, The Beauty Con Game. And I want to jump right to Chapter 1. And in Chapter 1, it talks about the Black Doll and White Doll experiment. And from what I've read, this is based on Kenneth and Mamie Clark in 1954 came up with this experiment.
Correct.
Can you tell us what was the goal of that experiment?
Well, originally I think that they were dealing with segregated schools then. So I believe that, from what I understand, they did a study. They did 3 studies where they studied the effects of segregated schools on black children. And I guess that was, I don't know if that was a surprising end result, a byproduct of their experiments, or whether they were specifically trying to, discover, the damage that was done to black children. But I believe that was originally dealing with segregated schools. And in the book, we also say that we totally disagree that segregated schools are the cause of low self-esteem in black children. As a matter of fact, I suspect integrated schools are a greater cause of self-esteem damage in black children than segregated schools.
Why is that?
Well, because in every integrated school that I have seen, and I'm not trying to pretend to be an expert, but when you talk to students that attend integrated schools, when you see the effects of integrated schools on black children, what you'll find is that a lot of times they're very white identified. They are, they actually are getting a much more of a dose of white supremacy sitting in the classroom. And a lot of integrated schools, what I have discovered is they're very seldom 50-50. They're either weighted where they're predominantly black, and that's not really integrated. So I would assume that the so-called integrated school is probably more white than black. And now you've got black students who are in this environment being led to believe that this is a better educational experience because white people are there, white students are there. So when we send our kids to integrated schools, a lot of times it's put forth as something that's an improvement over an all-black school. Not because the schools get greater resources. We don't explain that to our children. The overall impression that I'm left with is that you're going to get a better education because you're around white people. Now, what message is in there? I have to have white people in my life to have a quality of life. And we're teaching our kids that in grade school, high school. So I believe in a so-called segregated school that what I've discovered is the people that I've grown up with that went to segregated schools, they were more black identified. The people that I've known that went to integrated schools, they seem to be more white identified and almost detached and sometimes endlessly and a lifelong validation seeking of white people. But I think when you go to a segregated school, if the schools were equal, I think it would be a much, much superior experience for black students. And some people will say, well, I think it's good for them to meet all kinds of people and get to know. Well, yeah, it's good if they're meeting them in a situation of equality. But when one group is portrayed as superior to another group, they're not getting any valuable lessons that are going to aid them in life. They're actually getting a crippling life lesson. So I believe that integrated schools are part of the problem of white identification.
I was thinking as you were giving us your explanation, I attended a integrated high school back in the 1980s, and it was probably 70% white, 30% black. This was before Hispanics really started moving into the area that I live in. And keeping with the beauty standard, when you're in high school, you think of cheerleaders. Cheerleaders, are at the top of the food chain. They're the most prettiest, the most, beautiful and everything. And I only remember seeing one black cheerleader. There was only one black cheerleader the whole time that I went to school. Then when you look at what do they call it? The homecoming queens. Year after year after year, it's always a white girl who was the beauty queen. So do you think that kind of reinforces that false beauty standard in that environment or situation?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the overriding message is white is superior to black. White females are superior to black females. And I find that in some people that I talk to that have gone to integrated schools, particularly black males, a lot of times the black boys, they also adhere to the standard that the white girls are superior dating choice. The white girls are better looking. The white girls are a step up. A friend of mine, he admitted as much to me when he was in high school. He said that black boys used to go with the white girls because they felt it gave them status. It wasn't that they liked them better. They just wanted the whole imagery thing. The whole thing of feeling like you were more important, that you were better. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at young black females today and even black females who are not that young, you can see the devastation of this white beauty standard. I was at work and I saw a lady today. I didn't recognize her. I'd never seen her before to my knowledge. And she was walking around with a long blonde weave on her head, brown skin. And so I don't believe black women would be walking around with blonde weaves had they not had that imagery drummed into their skulls from a young age. And now when you look at the Beyoncés and you look at all of these so-called, Beyonce, and I saw your video, which I would advise people to check out, and it talked about Beyoncé being the most beautiful woman in the world. Well, first of all, the whole notion of the most beautiful woman in the world is a ridiculous notion. That's just an absurd statement. How can any one person be the most beautiful, the smartest, the cleverest, unless you can scientifically measure quantitatively measure something? There is no such thing as the most. There's no test that will prove that one person on the planet is the most intelligent person on the planet. There's nothing that indicates that any one woman or man is the most beautiful person. So the whole premise to me was phony. I knew that coming from the white supremacy media, it was designed to have a certain effect. There was there was some reason to categorize Beyonce that way. I suspect they're doing race baiting again. They do it with the Trayvon Martin thing, and now they do the flip side where it looks like they're over-complimenting black people. First it looks like they're catering to black people, then it looks like they're over-complimenting black people. What that does to me is it stirs up white angst and white resentment, which I think is the main purpose of that kind of nonsense. There's so much to say. I'm glad we're going to be doing a series of interviews, so I won't ramble on, so you can ask the next question.
Okay.
There's a whole lot to say, Scotty.
Yes, it
hits home. As a black female, this hits home.
Yes, it is a very deep subject. Now, getting back to Kenneth and Mamie Clark's interview, in the book, you talk about this documentary done by Kiri Davis, A Girl Like Me, and what was that like a duplication of the experiment, or did it have a different twist to it? How did that go?
I don't think I ever saw a video of the original experiment. I think I may have a long time ago, but I suspect that some similar questions. It may not have been completely identical, but the crust of it was the same, and that is you take some kids that are about children who are about 4 or 5 years old, and you ask them, what's the nice doll? What's the pretty doll? Then which doll are you? Those 3 questions reveal everything. If you ask a child, a black child, if you ask a white child, and you flip that script and you ask the white child in a similar experiment, which is a nice doll, get your money. The white child will pick the white doll. When you ask the white child which one's the bad doll, there's a really good chance they're going to pick the black doll. And if you ask them which doll are they're going to pick the white doll. So what more needs to be said? You could do that experiment in 5 minutes flat, and you would get the point of it. You wouldn't have to do a half-an-hour experiment. You wouldn't have to explain it. To me, it's self-explanatory. And when our children are picking, the white doll is the nice doll, and the black doll is the bad doll, and they pick the black doll as the doll that resembles them, what more needs to be said? That's telling you that the self-esteem devastation has already been bred into them. It is already there.
Now, this documentary by Kiri Davis was over 50 years after the original Clark experiment, and as you stated and as the book states, it mirrored the same results. There's 2 things I'm looking at here. How much of a role do you think media plays into that? And then also, how much of a role does parenting play into it?
If I had to guess, and this is just a guess, I would think that since I have observed people with their children, and the children sit in front of the TV set from the age of 2, and we think that it's harmless, but I'm telling you, at 2, they are recognizing images. They are recognizing concepts. They did an experiment one time with some young white children, and at the age of 4, they knew that a black-sounding name was a bad. Well, I'd say maybe 4 or 5. When they said, what name is the name of a bad boy? They picked a black-sounding name at the age of 5. So kids, I believe that if I had to guess, to answer your question, if I had to take a percentage, I think probably media is about 80%, parenting is about 20%. I think the average parent does not walk around the house saying, white people sure are prettier than we are, white people are better. I don't think they verbally say that, but I think the way black people treat each other in front of our children, the way we name call, the way we say, yo, black ugly, think get your nappy-headed self over here. Girl, I can't stand combing your hair. Sit still. And, I thought your hair is nappy. Put some lotion on your ashy skin. All the ugly things we say. And then when we praise somebody, they have a tendency to look a certain way. Oh, she got long, pretty hair. Oh, you got good hair. Now, what do you sound like, seriously? Mm-hmm. Talking about good hair in front of your child who has different hair. What are we thinking? It's almost a sign of insanity that we would go around and praise someone's appearance who is vastly different than we are. And to do it in front of our children is just suicidal. So I think, I grew up with those messages, and even if the person wasn't as blatant as that, you still picked up that something looked better than you did. Now, I'm not a dark-skinned person, but I wouldn't pass for a mulatto. And I'm just calling it mulatto, whatever you want to call it, a non-white person with a black and a white parent. But even though I wasn't dark, I still felt the sting of the what would you call it? The uplifting of people who were lighter. I didn't have short hair, but I felt the sting of people who had a different texture hair. And I think it's even worse now, Scotty, because so many families have been infected with white people. And I say infected because that's what it is. Anytime you're in a system that's dominated by white people, that's oppressing black people, and you bring these people into your family, it's not that individual person is oppressing your family. It's the whole concept that collectively the people that represent your oppression are the ones that you've welcomed into your family. That is a problem. And now a lot of families have been infected with this problem, and they bring these children into this situation where these children are uplifted and praised and idolized. So I think it's even worse now because interracial relationships are so common that almost every black family I know of has white people married into it and has mulatto children who are into that family. And there's a really good chance if that's happening that brown and black kids are being devastated. They're being devastated on a level that we can't even imagine.
We're speaking to Pam of the Trojan Horse Press, and we're talking about the Beauty Con Game, which is one of their recent publications. We need to take a station identification break, and then on
This is Ron Hayes with Hood News, and you're listening to the Black Talk Radio Network. Stay tuned.
This is Tanya Free. Recent reports of seafood deformities, including eyeless shrimp and fish with lesions in the Gulf, have raised questions from scientists and fishermen about poisoning of the food chain and the overall safety of the seafood. BP and the government maintain Gulf seafood is safe. What do you think? How comfortable are you eating seafood from the Gulf? Go to TanyaFree.com to respond to this week's question of the week.
Join Tanya Free and friends at TanyaFree.com.
Now, Pam, before the break, we were discussing the effects or the problem, and you identified the media, and then also, how parents talk to their children, talking about nappy hair and their skin needs lotion, just really derogatory things. What are some of the solutions that you would advise to black parents who, first of all, I think they need to be, what would you say, cognizant of what they're doing to their children, because it was probably done to them and the cycle continues. So, how do we as parents break that cycle? Because, the TV media is everywhere. And so our children are going to be exposed to it. What are some of the solutions that you have thought of that we could minimize the negative impact?
That's a very good question. One thing, and I know this is going to take a little maneuvering, but it is highly possible and not as difficult as people think is, do not let the TV raise your children. Because if you do, you're going to get something that you're not going to be real happy with. You're going to get a materialistic, low self-esteem, ego gratification seeking, white validation seeking, non-white black person. I would say don't let the TV raise. I remember growing up, and the TV wasn't on 24/7. They didn't have 24/7 channels. They didn't have 5,000 million channels. The TV came on at a certain time, and it went off at a certain time. I remember the TV actually going off.
Mm-hmm. I remember.
That was it.
Mm-hmm.
And we played outside enough where we didn't want to sit in front of the TV when the weather was nice. Even in the winter, in the snowstorms, we played outside. I know nowadays it's much more difficult in some areas for children to play outside because it's just different. It's more, it's just a whole different thing. But we also had games that occupied us for hours. Yeah, I don't know if you remember Tinker Toys.
Yes.
Or building blocks.
Mm-hmm.
There's chemistry sets. We had a microscope. We had puzzles, cutout dolls, word games, all kinds of things, books. So there was a ton of things. I know parents put their kids in front of the TV set because that just seems to be the standard. And also I think we do it because it means we don't have to do anything with them. First of all, if you don't want to interact with children, if you don't enjoy children, don't have any. I know you're having sex, but the reality is if you know you don't want to raise children and put the time and energy into it, get a pet. That's number one. Try not to have children before you're at the age where you've not finished running the street. I know that's difficult because we're having sex, but we got to start planning our lives instead of letting life happen to us. And a lot of us have let life happen to us instead of designing our own lives. I know I'm speaking idealistically, but I would say think about whether or not you want children. And if you think, sometimes people know, I never wanted kids. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you know that. So if you know that, you kind of know that about yourself, do everything you can to avoid that. And maybe as you get older, you change your mind, and then you'll have children. But it's really easy to occupy children without turning on a TV set. You can also all kind of games. I mean, it's just, and I would say the simpler the game, the better. The electronic stuff, kids get tired of that real quick. I think it shortens their attention span when you have a lot of electronic gadget gizmos around. I would definitely advise against computer games, video games, endless that, because that's still television. Then those games are still reinforcing white supremacy. Tinker Toys does not reinforce anything except your creativity. So I would advise, do not let the TV babysit your children. Find creative games that do not reinforce white supremacy. That means you don't have images and pictures, and you don't have TV games and things that are connected to the television set, like video games and stuff, because believe me, white supremacy is riddled all through that. So that would be the first thing, is don't let the TV raise. First of all, don't have children that you're not willing to parent. 2, don't let the TV babysit your children. And 3, try to educate yourself so that you will not make the same mistakes that were made with you. Because we all grew up with these crazy statements about hair and skin. And if somebody says something around your children, if you have some understanding that this is incorrect, then you have a better chance of explaining it to your children in a way that will neutralize some of the damage that's been done to them from hearing all these really, let's be frank, ignorant comments that we make about each other and make about white people. And you'll have less of a tendency, if you educate yourself about white supremacy, you'll have less of a tendency to idolize white people yourself. Because your kids can pick up when you're idolizing white people. Mm-hmm. They know. Let me just add this real briefly. In the first book, Trojan Horse, Death of a Dark Nation, there was a story called Our Children Are Watching. And basically it was a true story about some kids in a high school in Georgia, I think about 3 years ago. And they had a segregated prom. And the black kids were the ones who were disappointed. The white kids weren't. They said, well, it's just a tradition. We don't think of it as racist. The black kids were like, we don't understand. Why can't we go to the same prom as the people that we're friends with? The white students overwhelmingly didn't have a problem with it. The white parents didn't have a problem with it. And what stood out to me was to show you the damage that was done to these black students. They actually, a group of them went to the white prom and stood outside and cheered their friends marching into a segregated prom. But when it came to the black prom, none of those white students were there cheering them coming in. So that just shows that, it's a terrible story. And one of the mothers of the black students, she said, she hated to see her daughter go through the same thing that she went through 20 years ago. So we're talking about black parents not understanding white supremacy and not helping their children not to idolize white people, and to protect themselves, because I'm telling you, every black child out here is going to get a taste of it. And if they're not prepared to deal with it, if they don't have any understanding of it, they can either be, the damage can vary from self-esteem damage to total devastation, where they turn on themselves completely. And I've seen it happen. When people become,
Well, I just had a thought as you were talking about, some of the solutions and the three things that you discussed. And for some reason, pictures of white Jesus popped into my mind. It's been a long time, since I've been in a black household that had a picture of white Jesus. I can distinctly remember when I was a child, probably about the age of 9 or 10 years old, I had went across the street to do something for my mother, who wanted me to go to this elderly black woman's home. And I can still picture it today. There was a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. on the wall, John F. Kennedy, and white Jesus. Now, I don't visit, I don't go to a whole bunch of people's houses outside of my family. So it's been a long time since I seen a picture of white Jesus on a black person's wall. But I would imagine, that only reinforces what you've been talking about, because, for some people, that's a deity. And he has white skin, so just the subliminal message that's sending. So I would like to add that they should remove all pictures of white Jesus if they're Christians from their homes.
Absolutely. The funeral I went to this weekend, I didn't really notice it at first, but as the service went on, I said, "Oh my God, this is 2012," and they had two pictures up on the the podium. Behind the preacher's podium. Mm-hmm. And they're both, one was a white Jesus, another was a pastoral scene with Jesus and some people, and all the people were white. And see, this is what I'm talking about. If the parents, if black adults do not educate ourselves about white supremacy and what it is, we can't help our kids. So at those people in that church, and they were very nice people, had they been aware of white supremacy, they would have never let that picture stay up. As a matter of fact, they might have even gone as far as to question the validity of Christianity practiced the way the slaves were taught. And that's my problem with Christianity, is not Christianity itself, but the idea that you will continue a slave tradition that was established over 100 years ago. And you have to think about it. Why did the slave master teach you Christianity the way that he taught you? To keep you oppressed and to keep you passive and submissive. Now, why would you practice that same religion 100 years later and expect to be free? Expect to be psychologically free? But the reason I don't really mention religion much, and we don't mention it much in the books, is we have so many hurdles to cross with our people that if we throw too much at people and without having something to replace it with, mm-hmm. then it defeats the purpose. Now, if I can tell you which religion you should belong to, and I can lay a foundation for that, then perhaps I can talk about Christianity in some detail. But I do know one thing, that was not the religion of much of Africa. And certainly the way Christianity is taught and practiced by American black people serves the system of white supremacy. Otherwise, they would not be so accepting of it.
And all the imagery that I think comes from it as well. Getting back, before we jump to chapter 2, you, in the book, it's talking about Sanford and Son, 100 best TV shows of all time by Time magazine. And you just quote some of the stuff that the character Fred Sanford, who was played by Red Fox, speaking to Aunt Esther, who, by the way, was a beautiful female. I've seen some pictures of her, in her younger days, and she was very beautiful. But why do you feel like it was important to put that into the book?
Well, I felt like it was all part of the beauty con game. I mean, if you think about it, Aunt Esther, in my recollection, I have never, and I could be wrong, but I have never seen a light-skinned black female being ridiculed by black people on a TV show, movie, or anything else. It has always been a dark-skinned black female that is ridiculed, that is made to appear foolish, that is made to appear undesirable. And so when you think about this really super popular show, that I know people who to this day who still love that show. It comes on in Chicago. It was coming on in Chicago every night, you know, as a rerun on some station. And so when you think about that, why? See, I'm firmly convinced that this media is nothing more than a propaganda machine. I don't think it serves. I don't think it's an entertainment instrument. I think it's a propaganda instrument that uses entertainment to carry its message. Because they know the average person, as long as they're entertained, they're not thinking. So I think that there's a reason the Sanford and Son keeps coming back onto television, because it's anti-blackness that's being perpetuated. Black people criticizing other black people, ridiculing other black people, making fun of black people's features, ridiculing the features of Aunt Esther, and on and on. What's his name? Sanford's son, being very disrespectful to his father, Lamont. And so I think it's really just encouraging and promoting and reinforcing the notion of black on black verbal violence, black on black attack on black people features and black people as a group. So we put it in there because beauty is really one of the most potent weapons that the white supremacy uses, the concept of beauty, because their definition of beauty is simply just a made-up definition, which is what the book was really designed to do, was to expose this. This is made up. This is made up. It does not exist. The whole idea of white beauty, of a white beauty standard being applied to everybody on the planet, is ludicrous, when white people only make up 9% of the world's population. That's like saying that you've got a species, then you've got giraffes, and every animal on the planet is being judged by giraffes. In Africa, let's say every animal in Africa, say giraffes are 9% of the animal population in Africa, and you comparing every animal to a giraffe. That's how ludicrous it is. You say, well, yeah, something's wrong with that lion because his legs is not as long as that giraffe. And this is ludicrous. We're trying to expose how ludicrous it is to let 9% of the world's population determine what the other 91% should look like.
You know, one of the quotes from the Fred Sanford character that you have in here, where he's speaking to the character Aunt Esther, I'm just read this. I'm calling you ugly. I could push your face in some dough and make some gorilla cookies. What is one of the animals that they use to disparage black people? And that's apes, gorillas, and, you know, I could be incorrect, but I'm willing to bet it wasn't too many black writers writing for that program.
I would be surprised if there were, because there's so few black writers writing, period, no matter what the show is. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was. It sounds like something, you know, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But again, black people do mimic white people all the time. The stuff we say about each other, I asked some people one time, they were describing Morris Chestnut, the black actor. He looked like a gorilla. And these were black people in their 50s. And so I stopped them. I was in a break area at work, and I said, why would you call that brother a gorilla? And I said, don't you understand that this is what white people say about us? Why would you say that? And everybody got quiet.
And these were older people.
Yes. They were like people I would say probably the average age in that room was maybe late 40s, early 50s. And they didn't know any better. So you can imagine what they're saying in front of their children. And that is a huge reason why our children have self-esteem issues. But like you said, it's just a curse that's being passed along from generation to generation out of our ignorance and our lack of understanding that none of this makes any sense. We did not come from apes. And white people know we did not come from apes.
Yeah, we're the original people, and that's been backed up by scientific evidence.
Right.
We're speaking to Pam again of Trojan Horse Press, and we're talking to her about their latest publication, The Beauty Con Game. We are going to take another break. You are tuned in to the Black Talk Radio Network.
Services for the best in graphic design and custom audio creations. Make your next project shine on a professional level with BP. Brilliant people creating beautiful presentations to help your business prosper and increase your bargaining power, resulting in bigger paychecks.
Vast prices, vast production.
Call us now.
937-736-0096.
BP Graphics and Audio Services.
And we're back, and we thank you for staying with us. Once again, we are speaking with Pam and talking about the book, The Beauty Con Game, which is published by Trojan Horse Press. Before I go into another question, Pam, can you tell people how they can obtain this book and any other books written by Trojan Horse Press?
Sure, I'm glad to. We have a website, and it's TrojanHorse1.com. And that's TrojanHorse1.com. And if you go to that website, you can get information about all of our books. You can also read excerpts. And we're going to be, we got a blog, but we haven't been posting to it because there's so much time goes into doing the books. But we're going to be posting a lot of new information over the next couple of weeks on our website. So hopefully your listeners will check it out.
I definitely would recommend it. I want to jump to Chapter 2, Why Black Men Should Read This Book. And as a black man, I have been finding a lot of useful information as I've been reading the book, not just for myself, but as I mentioned, I do have 3 daughters, so it's been helpful in that regard as well. But on page 9, you talk about Clarence Thomas, and this really caught my eye because I'm very engaged in politics. Some people say too much so, but Clarence Thomas has always been, let's say, what is the good word to look for? He's been much maligned among black people because of his perceived bias. He has a white wife. His political views are conservative, and most white people most conservatives, I should say, are identified as white people. And when I read this in here, I'm going to just read this. Justice Clarence Thomas grew up in the 1950s. Due to having dark skin color, he was ridiculed by friends as ABC, an acronym meaning America's Blackest Child. And I had never heard that before about, his mistreatment as a child. But once I read that, that really gave me a lot of insight into, why Justice Thomas holds the views that he does today.
Absolutely. And, thanks to Kyle's, because I believe Gus Renegade on Kyle's, another show that I would highly recommend, he mentioned that, and we were actually, I think Gus and I don't know if we were having a private phone conversation or whether he mentioned it on the show, but it was, at first this book was really aimed at black women, black females. But then I got an email from a Kyle's listener, a male listener, and he was talking about all of the things he went through as a dark-skinned black male. And then when Gus told me about that, and I said, we really need to expand this book and make sure that we give black men a reason and black boys a reason to read this book, because they also are being penalized and demonized for looking black or looking too black or being dark. And I would tell you, after reading that about Clarence Thomas, it softened my heart toward him.
Me too.
I don't agree with his positions. I don't agree with his lifestyle or anything like that, and I think it's tragic. But I also started to see him more as a victim than as a villain.
It just made me understand where he was, why he is the way he is, and what he was basing his views on. And I highlighted this portion. Thomas has admitted to a period of self-hate in his life, which as a black conservative, he projected onto other blacks as evidence of victim group discrimination. And you know, considering how long I've been doing Black Talk Radio since 2007 and primarily focusing on politics, I have had the opportunity to interact more with black conservatives, and I've always suspected the same, that, you know, there has to be some measure of self-hate because of the derogatory things they will always say about black people. And so, you know, it was interesting to see in the book that you wrote that Thomas admitted to a period of self-hate in his life, and which is, you also wrote, projected onto other blacks as evidence of victim group discrimination.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's, I would say he hasn't had a period of life. I would say his whole life has been a period of self-hatred, and that continues to this day. Of course, if you look at other black people who are representative of you, and you disparage them and criticize them, or say they instead of we, of course there's something going on with you. If you look at your male, female, if, for example, me as a black woman, haven't had a black father, and I decide that I want nothing to do with black men, even if black men have mistreated me, even if every relationship I had with a black man has been a bad one, for me to take the position that black men are no good, and I'm saying that I came from nothing. So of course there is a reflection of me. The same thing when black men do it. Of course there's a reflection of you. And the tragedy is that you think as a black person that you can separate yourself from black people, yet still be proud and black. That is, to put it not so kindly, that's insanity. I mean, I think the thing we have to be clear about with each other is that we have literally come through a system that has rendered us insane on some level, and that we do have the opportunity and the obligation to try to cure ourselves and heal each other. Because I suspect that, Scotty, had anybody else come up through 500 years of the type of degradation and torture and family breakdown and cultural robbery that black people have gone through, they wouldn't even be sane. They wouldn't even be able to function nearly as well as we do. So I give us much credit for not being literally so insane that we can't even function. But we have to admit that we have some mental illness within our group collectively. Otherwise, we would not be doing the things that we're doing.
I would have to agree, and I would have to also say that I have to do my own self-reflection, because there are, you know, even though I'm 45 years old, sometimes I question, well, why did I do that? Or why did I say that? Or, you know, just questioning myself and trying to get to the root causes of why I believe a certain way. Now,
yeah, I do the same thing. I'm sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do the same thing. I mean, it's like my slave training kicks into place. Like, for example, interacting with white people. Sometimes I find myself defaulting to the wanting to, what's the word, be overly cordial. And I have to pull myself back and say, wait a minute, what are you doing? Not that I have a problem being cordial. I'm being cordial to anybody, simply because it's a reflection of how I want to go through the world. I do not want to go through the world being, disrespectful and impolite. However, I think that when you find yourself going out of your way, overextending yourself towards white people in ways that you don't do with black people, you have to pull back and say, what am I doing? Because the natural, what we've been trained to do is to appease and please white people, to try to prove to white people that we're okay. Listen, I'm a human being, I'm okay, I'm not, even to the extent of saying I'm not like those other people. And I've seen black people do it, and I know I've done it, where you actually trying to act like, well, you know, I just want you to know I'm not the typical nigga. You know, so it's kind of a deprogramming, what someone once called a deniggerization process. We've gone through a niggerization process. I believe it was Neely Fuller. And the niggerization process is just having internalized all of the lies and all of the misconceptions about ourselves that make us feel less than human, that make us feel inferior. And it takes time to deprogram that. And so I just always tell myself, you know, listen, just be aware. Just be aware. Don't beat yourself up. You've been damaged. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Now, in Chapter 2, 4 Reasons Black Males Should Read a Book About Beauty, and under reason number 1, black males who despise the person in their mirrors, you're right, black males are just as conflicted over skin color, hair, and facial features as black females, but it's not as obvious because males are not pressured to transform their faces, hair, and bodies with makeup, hair straighteners, weaves, and plastic surgery to look more attractive by white standards. Now, today when I look at the entertainment industry, I would agree with that statement that black males don't feel as pressure. But when I look at old videos of Chuck Berry, what's the other guy named Little Richard, and so I would say back then they surely did seem to be under pressure to conform to this white beauty standard.
Sure, I agree. And you remember the conch and the do-rag and all that. Yeah, there was a lot of pressure. I suspect a lot of pressure came from other black males. In addition to that, is guys, they were also trying to impress each other. Having the longest, slickest, straightest conch. But yeah, absolutely. And I think too back then it was more common for light-skinned black males to get a lot more play. I don't think that's as true today. But I do think back then light-skinned black males were seen as pretty boys, more so, and they were seen as more of a catch. And some women wanted to be with them because they thought their kids would be prettier. So I do agree with you. In that era, I think there was a lot more pressure on black men to conform to white beauty standards. But I think even though they don't have to conform as much today, the damage is still there.
I would agree with that.
Damage is still there.
But even just my generation growing up in the 80s, the Jerry curl, it is only now that it seems to me that black men, especially, not to say that black women, a lot of black women are not, going back to wearing their hair natural, but I see it more acceptable now with black men with the dreadlocks, and, we've always worn braids and stuff, but going back to my own time as a teenager, I would even say, Jerry curl was just an extension of the other hairstyles. Because we were not liking our natural hair and wanted to change it.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I had noticed, too, was I used to think, because, I always loved the natural. And I'm not talking about a big old big old natural. I'm just talking about a little bit of natural on the top. I always thought that was nice. And I used to ask, but I said, why you cut your hair so close to the scalp? And I suspected, even though I never got this answer, that they didn't like their nappy hair. I still suspected, sometimes I hear, some people imitate the athletes and blah, blah, blah. But I thought to myself, cutting your hair down almost to where the scalp shows, that to me doesn't indicate that you're trying to be an athlete necessarily. I think it still has to do with not liking their nappy hair. And I call it nappy because to me nappy is not a bad word. I know some people think it is. And I wish there's a better word to replace it, and hopefully somebody will. Because nappy, like Gus Renegade said, does have a lot of connotations to what white people say about black people's hair, like negative connotations. But for me, nappy is, I always loved nappy hair on black men, even when I was younger. But I suspect, like you were saying, that even, it may not be as blatant or obvious and perhaps not as necessary. Yeah, it's just a lot of damage. I mean, what did the guy that was playing in the commercial, and I think it's in the book too, said that, he didn't have a good hair day. His hair was looking a little nappy or something like that. And that's in another chapter, and we cover that. Well, actually, that's in that chapter.
No, it was, I was just looking at it. Give me a second, and I will find it. Let me see. I was just looking at that. It wasn't Sammy's. What? Say that name again.
Page.
Isaiah Mustafa.
Yeah, that's Isaiah Mustafa. Right. That's on page 10. In the old Spice commercial.
Let me read that. Yes, it does have to be real hair. I want my kids to have nice hair, so she better have good hair. 'Cause I don't know if you check my hair out lately. Aside from today, it's normally nice. Today, it's slightly nappy. And that was Dr. actor Isaiah Mustafa, who was featured in the Old Spice commercials during a September 2011 E! News interview.
Now, who would have thought this really nice-looking black male had issues about his hair? That's why I say, even though black men may not be as obvious about having hair hang-ups and skin hang-ups, obviously those examples that we give in that chapter about why black men should read this book, pretty much it's self-explanatory. It just goes to show that even on the surface, when we appear to have self-esteem, we appear to feel good about ourselves, that white supremacy, devastation, has wreaked havoc.
Mm-hmm. And I want to jump to reason 2, racist images of black males in the media. And see, I don't watch a whole lot of movies, so I guess I'm not the best person to comment on this, and I don't watch a lot of TV, but and I'm just taking a guess, but I would think that there will be more positive roles for black men in media, but although I can't tell you any other than, perhaps the Cosby Show and some of the spin-off shows where black males were, portrayed as college students, or, Dr. Huxtable, the character of Bill Cosby. Do you think that it's getting any better, or are these just tokens?
I think actually it's getting worse. I mean, I
think
can't.
It's getting worse?
Yes, I think that the black buffoonery has gone through the roof. I think white supremacy is moving into a new phase. I think it's they went through the thing of the tokenism thing. Now I think it's straight all out warfare. I mean, everything is about black people assimilating, super assimilating, interracial dating, interracial breeding and mating. It's still the same black, the Tyler Perry sitcoms. I mean, they are a total buffoonery.
Yeah,
they would make Andy and Amos and Andy look like the most progressive show on the planet. Mm-hmm. So I think that the imagery has gotten worse. I think it's almost like a 3-punch TKO. I mean, they're hitting us with the interracial dating. Right then and there, you lose your perspective. You lose your grounding, your footing. Because you're being attacked by the same people that you're looking in the face at every night or every morning and saying, I love you. So, I mean, it's really just putting black people in a position, I believe, where we'll be so psychologically devastated and so self-disrespecting that no matter what comes after us, we will not defend ourselves. And I think that's what the purpose of, they're coming after us full force now. The stereotyping, you can see a lot of the old imagery that you used to see. Black people bucking their eyes. Black people just really doing the kind of roles and the kind of things that once we used to protest about. They have us so confused and so self-disrespecting that we actually don't see anything wrong with being degraded. And when I say we, I mean that when you try to talk to people about it, they say it's just entertainment. Mm-hmm. They've got us to embrace our debasement. And I think that wasn't true in the past. I think black people used to collectively resent being degraded. Now we willingly and openly call each other nigger. Willingly and openly call each other bitch and hoe. Willingly and openly make fun of each other. And so I think they have moved into another phase where they've got us on the ropes, and now they're moving in for the TKO. They're moving in for the knockout punch. And the knockout punch is genocide. They are literally setting the stage for genocide. And the reason I say that, and we talk about that in the book, that using the beauty standard, the beauty con game, is actually opening the door to genocide. Because if I get you to such an extent where you don't like or respect yourself, you will never defend yourself. And you won't defend the people like yourself. And, this is what happened in Germany. The same thing. They used degrading images of Jews. Mm-hmm. And ridiculed Jews and turned them into subhumans. And when the government moved against the Jewish population, the vast majority of Germans didn't say anything. Because they had already been convinced they're animals anyway. We'd be better off without them.
And that was done through propaganda. That was done through media. Mm-hmm.
That's right. So what is happening to black people today? Our imagery. They make movies about us molesting our children. Precious. They had a movie come out, something about the Johnsons or something like that. I don't know if it ever made it to the theaters. About a black male molesting his father.
Well, I just came across a Samuel L. Jackson movie that someone was telling me about, to where he is having sex with his daughter. His long lost daughter. He went to prison. She was a child that he had by a white female who he thought had gotten an abortion, and then this white guy who's trying to get him to help him with this con gang, because he was a con man. That's why he went to prison. And so then this white guy tricks him into sleeping with his own daughter. And I was saying to myself, now wouldn't they just pick black characters to portray incest on screen?
Right. So this is why I say it's getting worse, because black people seem collectively oblivious to, we're so degraded that it's become normal. The abnormal has become normal. The Jerry Springer has become normal. The Basketball Wives and the White Housewives of Atlanta. All of this negative imagery, all of this buffoonery, all of this clowning, all of this black people showing the ugliest images that they can, putting us in movies, the precious movies and this and that, and getting us to co-sign on it. Well, yeah, that stuff really happens. Yeah. But when's the last time white people made a movie about a white female asking her white daughter for oral sex?
Wow.
We have to start having some kind of perspective. We can't just allow ourselves to be inundated by these images and just accept them. But I think it's much worse. I think it's indicative of how much danger we're in, if you want to know the truth. I think the worse the images get, the more indicative it is that the white supremacy system is moving against us hard and faster and harder. So yes, it's much worse. I think they've decided that we have outlived our usefulness collectively, and they are moving into a final phase of American. They're moving into another phase. I'll just put it that way.
I just have a few more questions before we wrap up the interview. Again, we are speaking to Pam of the Trojan Horse Press, and we're discussing the book, The Beauty Con Gang, and this is just the first of a series of interviews that we will do.
Many states are passing or considering laws that would allow phone companies to discontinue providing landline service to everyone. A recent survey indicated that the number of American homes with only wireless phones continues to grow. My poll question this week, how often do you use a home landline? Go to TanyaFree.com to respond to this week's poll question.
Join Tanya Free and friends at TanyaFree.com.
Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to BlackTalkRadioNetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk. Black Talk.
And we are back. And Pam, I want to thank you once again for taking time out of your day to share this information about what I feel like is a very important book about a very important subject. So, thank you again for the work that you're doing and taking the time out of your day to spend with us.
Well, thank you for asking me. Seriously, this is very, it helps me also because, talking about it reinforces my decision, to keep on educating myself. So this is helpful to me as well.
Now, you talked about genocide, committing genocide, and reason number 3 in the second chapter, 4 reasons black males should read a book about beauty. You talk about committing black males committing genetic suicide, and let me read this. And then I'm going to give you some thoughts of something that I thought when I saw a picture today. Some black males are so repelled by the image in their own mirrors that they are deliberately breeding with white, Asian, or Hispanic females to rid their offspring of the racial ugliness they secretly and sometimes openly believes exists within themselves. Now, Robert Griffin III was a highly recruited football player. He's a quarterback. I can't remember the college he played for, but he was just drafted number 2 overall in the NFL. He was drafted by the Washington Redskins. And there was an article that I came across today about his fiance was seen at a Bentley dealership test driving a drop top Bentley or whatever kind of expensive car it was. And, you know, and then so I went to the page and I found out that his fiance was white. And so I'm looking at her and I'm looking at him, and that, and you know, maybe it's because I have been reading in the book, but it came into my mind that I'm looking at him next to her. He's very dark skinned, black male. And I'm thinking, you know, he probably thinks he's ugly. He probably thinks you know, just the things that I just read out of this book. Is that he, you know, is choosing. I wonder if he's choosing this woman because he truly loves her, or because he's, you know, wondering about what his offspring's going to look like.
I suspect that there's no accident that a lot of the black males and to some degree black females who have a tendency to date interracially often are darker. I think there is a direct correlation between that. I do think it's like what we talk about in the book, that so many dark-skinned black males suffer in silence. You know, they're almost like the hidden casualties of the beauty con game. And, of course, I believe that, okay, one thing, is he loving her? Well, it's what would you call love? Is love something where both people are open and honest about who they are and what they are? Is it possible to really have a deep, abiding love for someone who doesn't know you, who you don't know? And I find that in a lot of interracial couples, in my opinion, the black person is wearing a mask most of the time. They're not being their genuine selves. If they were their genuine selves, their white partner would probably have a problem with them. What I mean by that is, if they were openly and honestly expressing their pain under the white supremacy system as black people, I suspect that white partner would not want to be involved in a serious relationship with them.
You mean like if they're, you know, making comments like Trayvon Martin, oh, that's the system of white supremacy, that white police chief and that white prosecutor, and because George Zimmerman's father's white, that's probably, you know, just social commentary about the ills and speaking on racism. You're saying that a white person wouldn't want to sit around and listen to that?
No, I don't believe most would. I found I'll give you an example of what I mean. When I was about 10 years old, a relative came over. Well, I forget exactly who these people were, but it was a black male with his white wife. And they were related to someone. I can't remember exactly who. And he brought up something. He was having some difficulties on the job. And these were educated couple, you know, a professional couple, I believe. And he said something, and I forget exactly what he said, but I remember it had something to do with race. And his white wife was over there. I saw her roll her eyes. I don't believe they stayed married. I've noticed among black people who've been married a long time to white people, they have a tendency to be white identified. And I don't care if you know, they can say, oh, no, I talk about race. No, you don't really talk about race. You talk about the surface of race. What I'm saying is, if me, for example, there's no way in the world that a white man would marry me because I'm not white. I'm not white identified enough. And two, he would not want to hear what I had to honestly say. So I think that I don't really necessarily have a lot of faith in a relationship where people cannot be their genuine selves. What does that white person really think about black people? Are they ever going to really tell that black person? I doubt it. I've known so many interracial couples where the white partner doesn't have any black friends of the same sex. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But my point is, both of them are wearing masks. Neither one is being their authentic self. And what I mean is the same person they would be with a person of their same race. So it's easier, if you're white identified or white validation seeking, it is much easier to feel you love that white person because that white person represents so much more. They give you that white validation that a black person couldn't give you. And that can mimic love. But do you really love someone that doesn't really know who you are? And do they really love you? And I will give you this one test, and I'm going to make it long, but this is a test for me. I watch people having children with white people having children with black people. But I'd like to know, when black children are dying in the street, do those white partners, husbands and wives, ever express any kind of support for those black children? Do they ever come out and march for those black children? Do they ever come out and get involved in saving the lives of black children, even when they have a black child? Another thing is, I lay money that the vast majority of white people who have had children with black people do not teach their black children about white supremacy. They do not tell them the truth about the racist system. They do not give them information that would help to save their children from any kind of suffering. Now, you tell me, is that a parent that loves their child? See, I don't think black people and white people come together in a white supremacy system with a pure love, with a love that's not tainted, with confusion, with brainwashing and brain trashing and sexual fetishness and some degree of hypocrisy and phoniness. I don't believe you can come together with with a white person in the white supremacy system and not have a seriously flawed relationship. That's just my position. So, does he love her, or does he love her whiteness?
Good question. Would like to ask him. Now, before we close out, this is the last question from this chapter, and I think for me it's the most important reason, number 4, of why black men should get this book and read it. And again, this is what I identified as the most important reason. Reason number 4, degrading the beauty of our black mothers degrades all black life, male and female. And you put a quote in here from Karl Marx. The social position of a race is determined by the social position of the female. Again, that is by Karl Marx. And then you write, in every culture, the mother is sacred, the civilizer of her culture, community, children, and society. And again, as a black father, I think it's important for me to read this book. But as a black male, you know, who loves black females, that this book gives me insight into how to deal with my black sisters and understand the things that they are facing so that I can be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. But, you know, can you expound upon reason number 4?
Sure. If you look at, you know, to me, the white supremacy system, the media, whatever it is, they have gone after black women in terms of appearance, full force. It's a constant, endless degradation of black women's features, of black women as having sex appeal, as being beautiful, as even being feminine. Like the psychiatrist, the guy that wrote the article, the blog post in Psychology Today, Why Are Black Women Less Attractive? And then he claims that it may be due to the fact that we have more testosterone, so we're more masculine. So what I'm saying is, when the white supremacy system or any system focuses on a point and repeats the same point over and over again, this repetition, then they're telling you that there's a purpose to it. There has to be a reason why they're degrading black women to the degree that they are, more so than anybody on the planet. And I suspect it's because if they can devastate the female, they devastate the child. If they devastate the child, they devastate the nation. Mm-hmm. The mother is the nurturer. The mother is sacred in every culture. The mother is the determining factor of how those children will see themselves. The males, to me, are the creators of culture. The women are the instillers of that culture. So black women being depicted endlessly as whores and bitches and ugly and masculine and ignorant and mean and nasty and perverted and trashy and whorish and on and on and on. What does that do? Just try to imagine this, Scotty. Your mother, all your life as a little child, people name-called your mother, called her hoe and slut. Mm-hmm. How would that make you feel as a child? You would feel shame. You would feel worthless. And I believe that's the reason that they degrade black females. I think they do it to destroy the self-esteem of the children. They also do it to destroy the ability of that mother to nurture her children. Because once she internalizes the fact that she's nothing, how can she view her children as having value? Maybe that accounts for why there's so much abuse at the hands of young black mothers. You can see them on the street everywhere anywhere you go. You can see this played out. Shut up! Come over here! Get your black ass over here! Blah blah blah. Mean. Talk to the children like they're dogs. It's not that these girls and young women are bad people. They are just people who have been convinced that they have no self-worth.
Brainwashed.
So, that's right. They've been brain trashed, and they've been psychologically devastated, and they can't help but put that curse on the children. The other reason that I would say they degrade black women, there's many reasons we talk about in the book, but one of the reasons I'll touch on real quickly right now is it drives black men away from black women. Even when black men are having relationships with black women, they don't value them. So now you've got two people in a relationship where the female is not valued, where the male is not valued because the male is the offspring of another female. Mm-hmm. Your mother's a bitch. Mm-hmm. So does she value her male partner? So you've got two people who are attempting to have a relationship, attempting to have a marriage, attempting to raise children to be healthy, and they can't. So the whole foundation of every culture is the family. That's the single fundamental unit. And when you can devastate the ability of people to form stable families, they're toast. So I think that the black female is degraded to destroy the bond between the male and female, to destroy the offspring, and to destroy the future of black people collectively.
Well, Pam, I want to thank you again for taking time out of your day to come spend with us. And again, I want to highly recommend this book to the listeners, The Beauty Con Game, published by Trojan Horse Press. And that website is Trojan Horse, TrojanHorse1.com. Is that correct, Pam?
Yes, it is.
Well, Pam, I'm certainly looking forward to our next interview because I am really learning a lot from this book, and I think it'll be a benefit to our listeners. And again, I want to encourage them to get the book. Now, I always like to give a guest the last word. We've discussed a lot. If anything you want the listeners to take away from this interview on the first two chapters and the things we've discussed, what would that be? If they take anything from what they've heard thus far, what would that be?
Well, it would be, if I could say one thing, and that would be that if we're going to save our nation, we have to start with our children. And we have to start with the fundamental self-esteem issue. When your child looks in the mirror, what do they see? And we have to change what they see by changing what we see, ourselves as adults. So we have to change ourselves as adults so we can help our children.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Well, Pam, thank you again, and you have a good night.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. Looking forward to the next time.